And same thing the origin of the fish. These things just abruptly appear with no trace of an ancestor. Now we go to dinosaurs. You know, it's interesting. People always say, what happened to the dinosaurs? I have a better question. Where did the dinosaurs come from? Paleontologists have virtually no clues to the origin of the dinosaurs. They appear in the fossil record in increasing numbers after the middle of the Jurassic period, already structurally distinct. Next. Let's keep them going. Actually, this is interesting, because you have different theories of dinosaurs, and one of them is interesting because it actually talks about the idea of a flood. And it says, a real trouble, this is one of the models of the ways that dinosaurs were killed off. A real trouble with this category of theory in which dinosaurs left the stage with a bang is that it is almost impossible with such a scenario to explain why so many groups seem not to have been aware of the great global commotion that was supposedly enveloping them. Keep going. Fossil record speaks of two things. This is what the fossil record talks about. Death. It's not going to help you with evolution. Fossils die, so it doesn't help you. And extinction. That's what we see in the fossil record. And we see stasis. Totally mitigating against the evolutionary model. We see extinctions and we see death in stasis. This is not going to lead toward an evolutionary increase of information, or even the evolutionary model won't work. Next. This is the report I was talking about. Modern stratigraphic techniques, however, seem to indicate that the dinosaurs' extinction was truly sudden. Some feel that a time span of a year or less cannot be ruled out. This has led to modern revival of catastrophism, which is growing in popularity. Eric Asia, a former geologist, basically is talking about the idea that what we're seeing is the major structures, the major features of the Earth can be better explained by catastrophes. Now, of course, the geologists won't accept one catastrophe; they'll have multiple, but I'm seeing, instead of this uniformitarianism where the present is key to the past, we're seeing more and more where more and more geologists are holding to a catastrophic perspective. And you'll find that in the terms of the Grand Canyon. You're going to find a lot of people from expecting to see the Grand Canyon, they realize it's from a flood. It's from a breached dam. The evidence supports that it's a breached dam that flooded that canyon. And more geologists are seeing that. Next. Going. Again, here's another quote. Despite the bright promise that paleontology provides a means of seeing evolution, it has presented some nasty difficulties for evolutionists. The most notorious of which is the presence of gaps in the fossil record. Evolution requires intermediate forms between species, and paleontology does not provide them. Okay, going. Time's up. I have one more minute. Okay. For example, well, first of all, Archaeopteryx. I got a quote by Alan Fiduciate. He's an expert in bird evolution. He says that Archaeopteryx was a bird, it was a perch bird. No amount of paleobabble is going to change that. It had feathers. Okay, which are incredibly complex structures. Okay, a feather and a scale is like day and night. We don't see this in the fossil record. Feathers are an incredibly complex engineering marvel. To assume that just came about by some type of random process on the scale is just ludicrous. Thank you.
So I think we're in rebuttals now. We each get 10 minutes for rebuttal, is that right?
We get 10 minutes.
Oh, for however we want apparently. Well, let's use ours for a rebuttal. Yeah. Okay. So a couple of points that we want to address, and the first one is one that Richard just made. Speaking specifically about how the fossil record shows extinction, how the evolutionary model, the evidence that we look at when we look at that in context, shows extinction, and it's true. It's true. We see massive amounts of extinctions, both gradual extinctions over time and seemingly singular events that caused very massive extinctions in a very short period of time, like what we observed with the dinosaurs. But what he failed to mention is that the fossil record equally shows speciation. It shows emergence. When we look at the different layers of rock, when we look at the age of the fossils that we find, we don't find them all jumbled up in the same strata in the rock. We don't find them all together. We find more simpler or more ancient, more basic species in the older layers of rock. And then we see on top of them a little bit different, not massively different. We don't go from just the ancient bacteria in one layer to human fossils in the next layer to dinosaurs in the next layer above that. What we see is a slow progression that shows both the extinction of old species and the emergence of new species. And then we can see a little higher the extinction of those species that emerged a few 100 million years earlier. And in each layer as we go up, we see extinctions and emergences. And it's been said, when asked what would disprove evolution, the common phrase that's been said and talked about and is right is, if we would find a single skeleton of a rabbit in a Precambrian strata, that would disprove evolution. If we could find a single one of a rabbit in the Precambrian strata along with the ancient bacteria, just at the Cambrian explosion, even if it was just in the Cambrian explosion, if we could find a single fossil of a rabbit in that era, then it would disprove evolution. But not just a rabbit. If we found a rabbit, or a human, or a bird, or a lobster, or any of a whole line of species that are recently emerged, if we find just a single one in one of these old strata, then the whole theory would dissolve and fall apart. But we don't see that. We don't see a jumbled mix of fossils, or a jumbled mix of skeletons in all of the different layers. We see a slow emergence of new species, and then we see the extinction of those species. We see emergence of new species, the extinctions of the ones that emerged in the last layer, all the way up to where we have now. It's bizarre to hear them talk about how we see extinction in the fossil record, but we don't see the emergence. We just simply don't find the modern species that we see today in the very old layers of rock. We don't find it. We see emergence and extinction.
Okay, I wanted to say a couple things about Stephen Jay Gould, who you talked about quite a bit. Stephen Jay Gould had a lot of problems with what Darwin had to say, but not about evolution. Darwin was an evolutionary biologist, but he was also a member of a school of thought called gradualism. And gradualism was something that he held on to because he didn't have any evidence to the contrary. And what gradualism states is basically that the pace of emergence of new forms is consistent and slow throughout history. And without access to 250,000 fossil species that we have today, Darwin didn't have any reason to believe otherwise. Since then, we have other reasons to believe otherwise. We have those different fossils. We have a lot more evidence. And Gould was a proponent of a theory called punctuated equilibrium. And they will tell you, of course, that punctuated equilibrium is an ad hoc theory put together to justify the lack of evidence, but it's not. It's based on the positive evidence that we have that we've developed since Darwin. Now, there are a lot of quotes out there from Stephen Jay Gould seeming to call evolution into question. What he's actually calling into question is the concept of gradualism. And creationists like to use quotes from Stephen Jay Gould a lot, but you also have to use the quote that he used in response to creationists, which basically said, in his words, they have to use my quotes because their own theory is intellectually bankrupt. That's what Stephen Jay Gould really had to say about creationism. Now, the Cambrian explosion is another thing that we heard quite a bit about. Cambrian radiation, again, that was a word that I prefer to use. It is not the only emergence of new life forms in the fossil record. They'll tell you it is. They'll tell you it's Cambrian explosion. They actually said this last time we were here. Cambrian, and then just death since then. Not at all true. Right on the heels of the Cambrian radiation was the Ordovician radiation, where we see those different phyla that emerged from the Cambrian then diverge into different classes and different orders. After that, we see several other extinction events, things like the big extinction event at the end of the Cretaceous that wiped